Assalamu alaikum, brothers and sisters. And good afternoon to all of you. And you are most welcome to our most beautiful campus. If this is your first time, please feel free to walk around and see what we have. When the center called me, they actually, in a very friendly manner, asked me to speak on Islamic culture and halal tourism in Hong Kong. Yes, this is topical, but it's really a difficult topic to attend to. But I have a few experiences I thought I should be able to share with you. So I will be doing a brief introduction, as I am doing now, and then we'll shy away a little bit from Muslim culture, because I think for being here and doing what we are doing, we are actually promoting Islamic culture or Muslim culture. I will then look at halal tourism and Muslim tourism, as is being mentioned. And then I will look at a bit of few examples that are basically running halal tourism across the region. And then I will look at Hong Kong's case and end with a conclusion and what I call image creation. For those of you who know a little bit of what I do or who do not know at all, this is UN tourism, and that is United Nations World Tourism Organization. This is the ethical committee who works with tourism businesses and tourism policies to actually identify what policy are we going to look at for the future of tourism. So we did that for a couple of years. This was also done during the Zoom period. If you look at the faces here, nobody is actually smiling because that was the time we were actually discussing the relevance of vaccines. We actually had 2 Zoom meetings, each one lasting for 8 hours. And that is why you see people looking gloomy from all over the world. The same group of people had to do the same thing. We had to bring in the chief executive of the World Tourism Organization to also listen before bringing in the World Health Organization. So we had to work together with this group of people to actually get the vaccines across to everybody. As we move on, this is Sheikha Al-Nawes. So Sheikha is from United Arab Emirates, and she will be the next chief executive of the UN World Tourism Organization, and that will be from 1st January 2006. So as we see halal tourism, Muslim tourism, with all the benefits and numbers that are basically coming from the Middle East, so we are looking at people that will be able to move that together. This is Saudi Arabia's what we call Vision 2030, their tourism document. So they are very serious. They are so serious in the last 3 years that they actually visited Hong Kong. So when they came on their Asian visit, they basically found time to see me, discuss with me, and so on and so forth. This document is on the website. You can basically be able to see it. So that's a little bit of introduction. And of course, as we discuss, we move on with halal tourism and identifying what basically we can do. I have a little bit of a long presentation, but I will cut it short. Short in the sense that I will not be defining things that I think we as Muslims do already know. So halal simply means permissible. What is allowed? That's basically what halal is. But increasingly, it has moved beyond simply identifying with Muslims, and I will tell you, the reason why. It has become a lifestyle choice. It has also become an approach to human well-being, and there are reasons, for that. Those who speak Arabic, and if you know, then you will know that the root of halal also comes from halla yahullu hillan wa halan. So these are all basically words that certainly means, permissible, and it's allowed or it's not allowed. Halal has a huge industry. It's not only about food. I think everybody will be familiar. It can be about pharmaceuticals. It's basically healthcare. It's travels, it's finance, as was mentioned earlier, and it's also tourism. there is also a huge impact in terms of, halal fashion. Some of the images are very clear. This is, hijama, and so on. This is Korean halal. This is hijama and all that. So we are basically looking at things, like that. From 2016, people started quantifying the essence of halal market. Yeah, I don't know how many of you remember. If you remember the Honorable Donald Tsang, right? So if you remember Donald Tsang was the first chief executive of Hong Kong that basically went to the Middle East trying to look for, finance market, halal market, and, things that are Sharia compliant. So if you look at the businesses that halal basically signifies, so you got food and beverages, finance, fashion, tourism, media, and all that. And of course, that amounts to $7.7 trillion. We can basically say $8 trillion. So the halal economy, or rather the halal market, is actually huge and is up for grabs. So it means that if you get involved, in halal, it's basically all that is here: goodness, purity, quality, authenticity, and indeed, like we said earlier, everything that deals with human well-being. So it's more than religious guideline. It's actually ethical, it's sustainable, and it has quite a few things, fresh, healthy, organic, seafood, I must put seafood, right? So, and many, many others. So how do we link that connotation, with tourism? Tourism generally is a temporary movement, moving from one place to the others. In many cases, less than 1 year. The quantification is 6 months, but we take less than 1 year. And so people go out to an unusual environment or to an environment that they don't basically live in all the time. And it's also seen as a commercial organization and operation of holidays and visits to places of interest. If you go deep into tourism, then there are so many divisions, visiting family and friends, going, for businesses, going for activities, that are, available, and so on. This basically signifies what tourism is and what people tend to do. So halal tourism is transformational, journey. So if you basically do it in the real halal sense of permissible and all that, then it is also some sort of a conscious travel. So it appeals to many people. And, religiously, we know, I think scholars are here, from Surat al-Ankabut, and that is basically the spider. So if you read the spider in English, then you will know that, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in that book was trying to say what the spider is and how basically the spider, relates to that. But in that verse 20, they said, and that is, Prophet Muhammad was identifying, trying to explain, that travel through the land and observe how he began creation. And there is no wonder that Sahabas basically started traveling. James was showing a few in China, and again, in China, in Guangzhou, for example, there is Ibn Waqiyas, who's basically one of the Sahabas. If you look at him in Google, he's basically listed as number 13. I'm not sure how true is that. But then the verse went on to say that the Prophet, to some extent, instruct people to travel, and observe. There are quite a few anecdotes that you might be able to look at. At one time, they said you should go and look for ilmi. You go and look for knowledge, even if you have to go to China, to sin. So halal caters for faith. And that means there are many things that people basically relate to it. So it's Muslim travel, Muslim-friendly travel, Muslim-friendly tourism, and so on, and going down, to ziyarah. So you look at that, ziyarah in Arabic is basically al-siyaha. So al-siyaha, that is the literal translation of tourism. And of course, to many of us, we are familiar, with ziyarah. So there are components of Islamic tourism, components that are basically identified, as halal. And that means hotel, of course, because if you need to stay, That means no alcohol, no gambling, food only halal. A Quran basically to be put in a particular place, for people who are visiting to see. Prayer mats. Sorry. You are talking about prayer mats. You are talking about selected recreation areas that are divided between genders. We also are seeing things like, transportation, if you like, is very significant, like airlines. Sometimes you have people who are basically selective. If an airline is basically selling alcohol, then, that business for that airline will probably, not be there. Food, of course, and to some extent. By the way, Cathay Pacific has been doing halal, according to what they said, for a very long time. So if you don't know, you should know. Now, why are we talking halal tourism specifically? This is simply because Muslims have probably 30% of the global population, and the number is growing. So we got basically some documents that will tell you we are basically now 32, 33, but I settle, for 30. And our teachings influences our lives, our attitude, our behavior, the way we present ourselves, and so on, and etiquette. So we are still the second, largest population, but of course the number is growing. If you see the number that is basically being added, in the past few years, then we will understand that the number is there. Number two is actually the age. So we are collectively seen as the youngest population because if you look at the number of Muslims in that age category, 15 to 49, we are 51%. And then, of course, 0 to 14, we are 33%. You put that together, to some extent, you are looking at 70% of global population. This is, by the way, by Pew Research. So if you can Google into Pew Research, then you might be able to find a little bit more information. So in the recent data that we are looking at, by 2023, we had 145 million Muslims that are basically considered tourists, traveling from one place to the other. And that number is basically going to grow to up to 230 million by the time we get to 2028. And so we got Muslim-friendly market, basically that also for tourism, that goes up to $410 billion. So the Hong Kong leaders are actually not doing anything for nothing. They see the money. So you want to chase the money. That's basically what we are doing. Because the Muslim travelers are actually big spenders, right? So they are big spenders when it comes to tourism. There are quite a few figures that I will probably like to say, but this is not this stage. But we will see that in addition to what they spend, you can break down a little bit. Saudi Arabia, for example, in 2022, spent about $14 billion. United Arab Emirates spent $10 billion. Qatar, $8 billion. And of course, Kuwait, $7 billion. I thought the ambassadors will be here so we can have some sort of discussion, but that's fine. So this is a niche aspect of tourism. That means it's something that is particular. And of course, there is a bit of evolution. So I do a little bit of examples, and then we move on to the case of Hong Kong. So Crescent Rating is actually a major consultancy company that specifically deals with halal travel, so globally. So they said that this is a market that is booming. So it's untapped market, and it has a lot of potential. So we've got quite a few. Of course, there was an argument earlier whether who was the first, who was the second in terms of non-Muslim or Muslim countries, but we will see that in a minute. The most popular destinations that are basically not Muslim is basically Thailand, Singapore, United Kingdom, and Taiwan. So we see Thailand, for example. Thailand recently came out with their industry action plan. So you look at Thailand. Thailand started in 2004, basically looking at halal tourism, before any other person. But they have been, modifying. So they bring governments but essentially this is a Buddhist community, so essentially a Buddhist community, but basically, with foresight. This was one of their taglines that they were basically using to sell their tourism in different Muslim-friendly, societies. Think halal, think Thailand. So what they did is they developed, a halal center. And by the way, this is the first major halal center in the world. And it was developed before the Tokyo Olympics. And that was when the Japanese really went to Thailand to study how to accommodate halal-seeking, visitors. So that was what happened. Chulalongkorn is one of the most famous universities in Thailand. We actually cooperate with other colleagues in the department, so we know what they do. So they generate an app very recently, and that app brings, once you get to Thailand, as a Muslim, you have everything on it. Of course, prayer times, offering halal business, and so on. Someone will say, but I have an iPhone. So iPhone doesn't work here, right? So this is basically local content. So globally, governments and businesses are also working towards what they will get. Taiwan, for example, also became a major Muslim destination. At any time, you have a lot of people from, Asian countries, from Middle East, and others basically going, into Taiwan. So they partner with Malaysian media, so they get people who are either influencers or people who are basically moving on. So they brought one of the major Muslim influencers basically in Taiwan to help them get, the numbers of tourists, from that country. Philippines, on the other hand, also decided to move on, with tourism. Again, tourism, halal tourism in the Philippines, everyone knows that Philippines is a Catholic country, but basically they see the benefit. And so they understand that this is a tourism segment that is basically contributing to growth, of that particular industry. And they thought that it's a positive trend, for the market. So that's basically what they are doing. So if you know the Philippines very well, you know Boracay, for example. So Boracay was closed, during Estrada, a few years back, to generate sustainable tourism. But at the moment, Boracay is actually being converted into a halal-only, destination. It's an island, in the Philippines. So their issue is to attract people from Gulf cooperating countries and also, basically, ASEAN. They have quite a few things, and these are some of the opportunities, that we are looking at. One of the opportunities is we have a huge middle class that is basically growing, as far as Muslims are concerned. We also have influencers that can actually help us to tell the narrative. So influencers are very much, common, big these days, so that can actually be a good thing. 70% of the global, Muslim population is under 40. Some will say under 50, 40. I think that's, again, a very good thing. And we have, a level of awareness, we have innovation, and we have investment in this sector that we can be able, to use. So according to some studies, so what we are looking at is we have to identify the demand side, of what is happening. So demand side, that means we have young people, tech savvy, the demography is okay, and they are halal compliant, group of people. So we have that particular group. We have halal awareness, and of course digital, connectivity, which we can be able to use, in our own benefit. We have responsible travelers who are basically, if you like, values-driven, or indeed ethical travelers, as well, because halal means you maintain some certain ethics. In terms of the supply, we know what we need. We know what is non-halal, we don't touch. We know halal, we basically, look at it. We also have to maintain some sort of, cultural understanding. I would not like to quote the Quran, but we saw it earlier in China, how cultural understanding is also, very important. We have technology and personalization, because these days, the essence of technology is basically to personalize what you need and basically, what you have. These are some of the apps that are basically coming out, from different, Muslim countries. I know who they are, but, for the sake of time, we just move on. So there are apps that will actually allow you as you move in. I have a few minutes to go. And then you have Saudi Arabia that is basically also developing a cruise business. So they have their first cruise that is basically going to the Red Sea. They have theme parks that they have identified in Islamic style. They have Land of Legends, they have Six Flags. And we have also Dubai now opening the Real Madrid world theme. So basically attracting people. Dubai is also building the first world's floating mosque. And that means, you can travel anywhere on the sea and you can basically literally pray anywhere because there must be Qibla, and so on and so forth. I will just jump into Hong Kong and basically, round up, with Hong Kong. So Hong Kong has tried to be doing well in the context, of halal tourism. And we can see the policy address from the chief executive, which we basically looked at. I tell people that I have been reading the policy address since 1999. There is none that I have not read. I still have them. And so the chief executive said, yes, he wanted to promote Muslim tourism, and he will strengthen accreditation, education, and promotion. So I picked those out. And he wanted to cap 5,000 if you are basically looking for a halal certificate. I leave it to businesses to see if that is actually a good benefit or not benefit. Before the chief executive's policy address, we had the blueprint 2.0 for tourism. And that was when the Muslim issue was also, identified in that particular, document. And of course, give me 5 minutes. Yeah. Yeah, and then of course, the argument that Muslim businesses are very much relevant, for the Hong Kong society. So they push. Yes, Hong Kong became number 3. James mentioned. But again, of course, we have a few other people. So we got Malaysia, we've got Turkey, we've got Saudi Arabia, those are basically Muslim dominated. And by the way, Paul Chan is also heading to the Middle East this time. I get so much personal when I talk about Paul Chan or chief executive because luckily for me, I've got 2 of my students that are actually working for them and they travel together. So I got, information, right away from other people. So Muslims are actually high spenders overnight. If you Google into Hong Kong government, you will see how much money tourists spend overnight. I will not tell you the figure, but it's certainly less than this figure. So we've got people that are basically, high spenders. So we move on very quickly. Hotels have been certified. 39 have been granted rating from 3 to 5. That is basically what we are looking at. Restaurants have been halal certified, but are we really seeing the picture? So 3, for example, they only have prayer space, they have mosque available, and they have halal breakfast corner. So that's very important. It's halal breakfast corner. It's not that the whole place is actually halal. But those that are graded 5 can actually be proud that they have halal breakfast. These are some of those hotels. I'm not mentioning names and I'm not marketing. So we move on from here. And basically, we understand, halal market. We understand the crescent rating, 3, 4, 5 is right there. And a few people do not basically have, things like that. I had a student asking me in Malaysia, why do they have this in their toilet? The student was asking me, and I thought, wow, education is very necessary. Again, I will not tell you what I replied to him, but, he knew we were joking. So this is the group. I agree so much that education is necessary. So anywhere I travel with my students, I make sure that we are basically, in the mosque. And I get very good, comment because they come out to me and say, wow, I feel great, I feel good. I say, oh, really, welcome to Islam. So I just picked this out from one of the assignments and just permit me 1 or 2 minutes to read it. And the guy wrote that at night we were assigned to a hotel. I wondered there was an arrow pointing to a certain direction. that is called Qibla. So he saw this, and he was recording this in any hotel, that we went. He said, and the Qibla arrow actually points to the huge black cube called Kaaba. I was happy. At least he said huge black cube, So, and then certainly he said followers are obligated to pray while facing Qibla. Well, he did all other, but he said that the photo below was only for the last hotel. And he really regrets that he didn't take the pictures of all the Qiblas. So this is part of education, and that basically generated a whole day of discussion, not only with him, but with the whole group of students that we are basically there together. So I agree that education is key. The last one is actually a little bit of what we can do, as scholars. Yes, that masjid was also shown, fantastic. So we can enhance the image of Hong Kong. The first one is cognitive. How do we look at awareness? So people have to be aware that, yes, this is interesting, this is nice, this is relevant, it's not just a building, or it's not just a theme. The second one is affective, how the customer feels. So how do you feel after going into a halal restaurant, for example, or after visiting a masjid? There used to be an imam here, Imam Suleiman. I'm not sure how many of you remember Imam Suleiman. He was always basically bringing people into the masjid. The last one is unique. And the picture that James showed of Kowloon Mosque is actually unique. You can never find it any other place. So that's how we think we can continue to build our halal society and promote our tourism in terms of halal manner in Hong Kong. I thank you. Assalamu alaikum.